Welcome to Mentoring Moments. Mentoring Moments is a sub-series of the eCommerce Edge podcast. It is composed of clips taken from Jason's one-to-one and group mentorship sessions.
So a bit of context. What's your coverage been like of Wayflyer when you were over here? Obviously, we dealt with New Zealand businesses in particular, probably for about 9 months last year. And then due to just a lot of tax regulation, we've had to remove ourselves from that region. But if they have an Australian bank account, we still try and do our best to provide. But yeah, I'd love to know how much you know about what Wayflyer is. And then also from me personally, I'm happy to expand a little bit more as to why I saw something like this and when this is awesome.
Yeah, I've heard of Wayflyer. I've never used or worked with Wayflyer. I've never connected Wayflyer with any clients for funding of any variety. But as I understand it, it's I guess similar. And you may tell me, no, Jason, you're way off base here. But as I understand it, it's almost like an independent version of Shopify Capital, in that you provide working capital for existing B2C businesses on an e-commerce platform that can prove a certain amount of revenue over a period of time, and almost like a bridging finance for e-commerce is how I would describe it. But again, correct me if I'm way off base.
No, you get a pretty decent job here on the sales team, I'm sure, if that's the initial grounding you're taking. Yeah, no, we are very much in the same market as Shopify Capital. Obviously, Clearco was around beforehand as well, but they've pulled from market. But yeah, we basically provide that unsecured, non-dilutive option. We more, in kind of difference to Shopify, we are much more trying to tailor, particularly for inventory and marketing needs. Obviously, that working capital piece, everyone needs it consistently. The good thing is there's plenty of options out there with PayPal as well. But we took a different knack of it and came from a marketing and analytics background. Our founder basically had a performance dashboard and enterprise level software that he'd bring in to various enterprise customers and realized there was a pretty consistent cash crunch always going on, particularly with that inventory cycle need. I'm sure you're well too familiar with it.
Oh, yes.
But yeah, he basically realized that actually if we were able to provide an unsecured piece to cover that, it would just, at the foundation of it all, allow brands to spend their own cash flow on the larger and longer term growth projects. So we will try and tailor something, and the reason why it's a bit more hands-on, something like Shopify is a great product because it is simplicity at its finest. If you do try and do 6 or 7 months, you can do that, but particularly with lead times changing as they are, we try and tailor it more towards exact needs. And then we try and just have a bit of more of a friendly approach to just making sure that customers are happy in every way they can be. I obviously joined it when it was 4 or 5 people here on the sales team as well. So I won't bore you with too much pitching, I promise. But it is, yeah, it's been a really good experience. I came from commercial real estate beforehand, and I was actually hired for the job of all places in a gym. There was a recruiter there who was feigning a bench press. I went and helped him out, and 4 months later I found myself working in e-commerce, but I haven't really looked back, to be honest. It's been a really good trajectory.
Wow. What a story. That's a pretty inspirational story coming from somebody who's worked in a completely different industry. And I've been working in eComm for over 20 years, but I think I'm coming up on my 23rd year now. I'm dating myself now, which is terrible. But yeah, look, it is. I love, back in the day when I first started out in eComm was considered and I know this is probably not a PC term to use these days, but the bastard stepchild of IT. That was what we were. We were the rebel, let's call it this way, the rebel stepchild of IT. We were considered the part of the industry that had no frameworks, that had no rigor, that was fly by the seat of the pants. We were just, we were driven by marketing, that nobody really gave a shit about e-commerce. And the IT space thought, oh, this is just filled with a bunch of fraud. It's never going to last. I remember the conversations with IT teams really early on in the early days. And because in the early days, eComm was expected to sit underneath IT quite often. They had the budgets. It wasn't, marketing oftentimes didn't have, in the early days, the budgets that were big enough to really support large-scale technical implementations of platforms. And a lot of that was driven by IT. And IT oftentimes were the only ones that understand the technical aspects of what needed to be done. And so you had this really round peg, square hole kind of idea where IT was against it because it started to democratize some of the capabilities in the business around commercials and transactionability and things like that. And all of a sudden I started to democratize that capability and put it into the hands of the teams in the business that were driving revenue, which is typically the marketers or sales teams. And this was it was really hard in the beginning, but what I learned very early on is that because I leaned more towards the technical side and I leaned always more towards the operational side of e-commerce, but I started out in the marketing side of e-commerce, what I found is that the industry, because it was so small, because it was so tight knit, because you couldn't go to university and get an e-commerce degree. It didn't exist. And so everybody in the industry at that time was 100% self-taught. There was no other way.
They were pioneering it as they went along.
Exactly. We were all making it up as we freaking went along. That was just how it was. Google ruled the roost, and we were all trying to figure out how to game PageRank, and we were all trying to figure out how to do link farming, and we were just trying to figure it out as we went along. But what I did notice right from day dot is that very tight community, very supportive, very willing to share knowledge, very welcoming of new people into the industry. And it remains mostly that way to this day. Like in any industry, you get the odd asshole. But in general, I would say I get along with people in e-com very well because it's a pretty inclusive community.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I definitely found that transitioning across. I'd been over my penultimate year of university. I only graduated in 2020, so the career's still young, but it was not trying to date you anymore, I promise. But yeah, it's a case of I was in Hong Kong, got offered a job out there in commercial real estate, and very much thought that is the direction I'd like to take. Moved to Sydney with that company. And yeah, I just had a bunch of initial interactions with not only Wayflyer, but also the recruiter I had was brilliant. And he said, look, do you want to be up in a suit for the next 20 years of your life? And my dad's military as well. I was always quite used to the more formal aspect. And it provided an opportunity of, as you say, like when it came to people flying by the seat of their pants, it's still new. It's still so new and youthful in its interactions with people on the sales team, whether it be calling people out of the blue or having those initial conversations through a prospecting meeting. It's really interesting to hear the different stories of how people got into e-commerce.
Yes.
It might be an investment banker who just didn't want to deal with the hours and then realized, I know numbers pretty well. My daughter came up with a cool product. We may as well try and implement this. Or it might be someone who's passionate about changing the world and has brought in their own ideas. So I've definitely found in terms of from a customer base, and I'm sure you are all too experienced in this, it's unbelievable the direction and level people come from, because it could be all over really. And ignoring, obviously the few growth guru style vloggers online. Yeah, we always have a bit of a laugh about them, but it's brilliant actually. And the people and the community is fantastic to be involved in.
And did you go to the recent iMedia conference? Have you been able to get into the conference circuit at all?
Yeah, so I'm adjusting my role slightly now and trying to really argue. So our head office is in Dublin. And my main push for this year is to try and transition over to a partnerships role, because we are missing out on so much opportunity. Particularly the ANZ market is so good when it comes to a community basis, and everyone just integrating and understanding the benefits of each individual business, no matter whether they be competitors or not. Yeah, it's a big move. iMedia looked brilliant. We are going to it's not Retail Fest, the one in Sydney at the IC.
Online retailer.
Yeah, online retailer, that's it. We'll be heading to that one. But yeah, it's absolutely got to be a priority, particularly when outreach is at an all-time high. And you need to find ways of actually really integrating yourself and not coming across as just a pushy salesman, but really making sure that we are foundationalizing ourselves with so many other great solutions and businesses in the space.
Yeah, I'll tell you one to watch in terms of, I guess, how she's done this and how she's done it so rapidly is Kate Massey from SearchSpring. She was relatively new to eComm just a few short years ago, came from an ERP background at J-Curve, doing marketing at J-Curve, and then she's moved into running SearchSpring down under. And the rate at which, and I knew she would, because she's very outgoing, she's very smart, she's very affable, very friendly. I knew she would crush it. But I tell you, when she went from not working in the industry to now, I think she won recently an Industry Person of the Year award at a recent conference. And she is, I guess, a prime example of how you can go from zero to hero in the e-com space in ANZ in just a matter of a couple of years, very short years. And she's making a big impact, positive impact in the industry. And actually, I would also say that the other good thing about e-com from an industry perspective is that it is probably one of the least sexist technical industries in the world. There's lots of technical industries that are the bro show, but from what I've seen anyway, there's lots and lots of female leaders in the e-com space, particularly in ANZ. And it definitely doesn't seem to be as, even though it falls under the umbrella of tech, it doesn't seem to be as male dominated as many other tech and IT industries can be. And so that's another thing that I like about it, is that it's very inclusive. It's when you're just as likely to come across a female, a minority on a panel or anything like that as you would as a white male, for example, like myself. And so I think that's the other thing.
It's hard for us to obviously talk about it, but it is, our most successful event this year was our Women in E-commerce event. We had a place in Manly, and the feedback on it was unbelievable, because it was just like, this is exactly what it should be about. And in terms of most of our leaders on our team are amazing women who have come from all different sides and are able to just understand. But it is such a relationship-based industry that it's fantastic to see and actually learn from as well. There's so much that you can pick up just through osmosis of being around these awesome people.
Yep, absolutely. And there's also a lot of, like me, obviously, I lived in New Zealand for almost 30 years, but originally from the States. And you get people from literally all around the world that have found themselves in ANZ or APAC, the broader APAC region. Again, they can come into the community very late in the game. Maybe they've worked in other industries, maybe they've worked in sales in other industries, but then they come into e-com. And as long as they're friendly and open themselves and they're vulnerable themselves, they'll be welcomed with open arms. So I think in general, again, you always get the rotten eggs, and they're pretty few and far between in e-com. But in general, I would say that it is just an amazing industry.
Yeah, now dropshipping is continuing to just be seen more visibly for what it is. I think actually a few of those gurus will be disappearing quite quickly as well.
I think anything to do with kind of fully automated sales funnels or lead gen done for you, or anything to do with kind of shortcuts in the industry tends to get excised pretty quickly. And even down to the cowboy SEO people that were doing black hat SEO for years and years, they get exposed pretty quickly as con artists and scamsters. And I like that too, is that we tend to be pretty rough on people in our industry that aren't doing things the right way. And I think that's how it should be. I think we should self-censor. I think we should drive people that are cowboys and cowgirls. I think we should drive those people out of the industry and leave it to the professionals that actually care about our industry, want to see it grow, want to see the industry become hyper sustainable. And I'm seeing that particularly in the B2B space, is that the B2C space and the D2C space, there's still a fair amount of people that I would say that maybe flit into the industry. Maybe they come from a marketing background, and so they think they can, if they've marketed anything at all ever, then they think they can come into the digital space and they think they can dominate digital marketing overnight. And it's a totally different kettle of fish. Whereas I find in the B2B side of the industry, B2B e-com in particular, because B2B e-com is so far behind from a maturity perspective, B2C and D2C e-com, these people are operators. They're the people that I'm talking to. They're operational leads. They're sales leads. They're very focused on revenue, but they're also very focused on the relationship, because in B2B, historically, it's been field sales reps and BDRs and BDMs and SDRs and AEs. And so they are so focused. And because B2B relationships with the customer tend to span very long periods of time, and they'll have a B2B customer that has been doing business with them 10, 15, 20 years, and it is all about the relationship. And so they're very much focused on building a sustainable digital business. Whereas I find that the B2C, D2C side, there's still this nagging legacy concept that we can just constantly go out and acquire new customers cheaply and quickly through digital marketing channels. And that's definitely no longer the case with exploding CAC costs through all the major channels, whether that's through Amazon or Google or Facebook or whatever it might be. They're all expensive acquisition channels now. There's very little underpriced attention in the market from a marketing perspective now. And with exploding CAC costs, I think B2C, D2C players are finally starting to see the light that, hey, we actually need to build a brand. We do actually need to build a community. We actually do need to bring the value. We do need to create repeat purchase. We need to focus on not only AOV, but also CLV. And I think that side of the market is slowly starting to get religion, but B2B has always had it. B2B has always had a long-term focus, because securing those customers, they haven't just been able to easily acquire customers digitally. They've had people knocking on doors, literally going out there and building relationships. And so they value every single customer very highly. I think that both sides of the industry can learn from each other, to be honest.
No, completely. And honestly, the way I came about your mentor sessions, and thank you in advance, it was through your really interesting posts about that B2B space in particular. Like, obviously D2C, it's bread and butter. It is all about cost to acquire a customer versus lifetime value. That's what we operate on. It's part of our underwriting process, is how we look at customers in general. But it's taking that next step of being like, all right, there is, and as you've made very clearly through your post as well, like a really big piece missing, and it's still very arbitrary what people are doing. But also, like, in terms of looking at a next step, like how from companies, either from our position or companies in market, like how they're going to build up longer term relationships, but two, also like more holistic relationships as well. We're finding, obviously, we have at the end of the day, we were a hypergrowth startup. We hired tremendously throughout last year. And then November, we had the classic tech redundancy of we've grown too fast due to changing macroeconomic conditions. It was honestly part and parcel, and it had to happen. But in terms of a BDR, CSM, CSA split, it is that quite regulated, normalized process of this is how we're going to acquire customers, alongside our marketing team, who will put out the occasional thing, and we'll just keep seeing inbound leads flowing in. And that's not what's going to happen. And it isn't what has happened. And you have to change the perspective. And it was why I was really interested to speak to you, not only to pick your brains, but also like, you have seen such a change from when you first started all the way to now. But I feel there's probably a few foundational elements that are still really prevalent within the entire process. And you want to shout it from the rooftops, really, and get more people to really understand, like, there are some significant pieces missing here that can actually help your business, not just for the next 3 to 6 months, but in terms of a long-term trajectory, change the way in which you do business as well.
Well, I think you already hit some nails on the head. So you've already caught on to the fact, even though you're relatively new to the industry, you've already caught on to the fact that partnerships in our industry, they drive just about everything. There's very little, if we think of even Shopify apps or BigCommerce apps or any of the major plugins, or even platforms like Klaviyo and other large scale, well-known supportive tech platforms that support e-commerce, in-region personalization platforms, Nosto, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The reality is that very few of those technologies will find success going directly to the merchant, right? It occasionally happens. Yes. Okay, maybe you got a booth, or maybe you're at a conference and maybe you're a delegate and you're at an iMedia conference and you've got the speed dating meetings where people have booked in to catch up with you so they can get the free ticket to the iMedia conference. And you maybe get a chance to pitch them over a 10-minute session and a beer, and maybe they'll be interested enough. And maybe you just hit your timing perfectly that they're looking for that type of technology at that time. So outside of those kind of happy coincidences that will happen and you can make a sale, the reality is that agencies and consultants drive the vast majority of implementations of supporting e-commerce tech, and even of the core e-commerce platforms themselves. And so the reality is that there's two types of partnerships that become really critical for businesses like yours. And this goes for anybody that's in the wider e-commerce ecosystem. One is technical partnerships. So how do we integrate in with platforms? So for example, obviously with Shopify Capital, they can, because they're part and parcel and they're plugged directly into seeing every transaction that goes through a Shopify store, they can immediately make automated decisions around underwriting and all of the risk elements that they need to take into account when they look at underwriting big loans, right? Somebody like you, because you don't own the platform, you've got to either have more of a manual process of getting that data out of those platforms and maybe getting a sales feed or something like that. Or you've got to create apps that can very easily plug into these SaaS platforms and pull the same data in the same way that Shopify can on their own platform, right? And so listen to the webhooks when the orders come in and keep a database basically of all the revenue going through the platform. Yeah. But you're still not going to capture revenue that's offline. And so you're only going to capture the online revenue. And so there's certain things that you'll have to do both from a technical partnership perspective, but also from an agency partnership perspective that will really significantly drive your business. And so obviously agencies, if they've got a whole bunch of D2C merchant clients that they're working with, whether that be they're a marketing agency or they're a dev agency, whatever they are, and they know that you're having operational capital challenges because, I don't know, let's say that you are paying your bills consistently late, not because you are insolvent, but because of the nature of the cash flow of a business, right? And they go, hey, it's going to help us as an agency. We're going to get paid more on time if these guys can resolve their cash flow issues. We're going to have our retainers paid on time. We're going to have our project payments paid on time. We're going to have all these things paid on time. It's going to help our cash flow too. So why wouldn't we recommend Waveflyer to our clients if it's going to help us and it's going to help the client, right? So there's all sorts of conversations that you're going to be able to have that, short of you doing a super expensive outbound motion constantly and effectively doing cold calling, cold emailing, cold DMing merchants and saying, are you having cash flow issues? We can help. Apart from that, how are you going to get in front of those clients? There's only a few ways. One is content and two is partnerships, agency and tech. And those really, to me, and again, this is just one man's opinion, those three ways are the ways that you're really going to create a sustainable business and market.
100%. And it definitely needs to be a transitionary phase. When everyone was looking at hypergrowth last year being a rocket ship. And suddenly we found that was why we were able to grow so quickly, because we have a very simple plugin to one of our dashboards, and that's how we can take on a company's information. Since then, it's funny you mentioned offline revenue as well. This year, we've taken much more of a consideration into offline revenue. It's one of our unique selling points as well, is whereas Shopify can just give you what your D2C revenue is, we can consider it holistically and then do a fixed repayment to help you with that as well. So, but with those two pieces, obviously, what has changed this year is we mentioned money last year. We mentioned unsecured, non-dilutive. Two trigger phrases. People are like, absolutely, let's get the business going. Interest rates are so low anyway that let's get this going from a fee perspective, and we will just keep seeing, we'll say hi to you when we're on the moon.
Yeah.
But this year, obviously, not only is the market changed and consumer sentiment has changed significantly as well, people are more hesitant to take on additional funding because they purely do not see a long-term forecast or plan as to where things are going to go. And also, you are now competing with everyone in the space from a cold outbounding perspective to bring in more clients. So you're finding a lot more hesitation and people rejecting those initial meets because they are getting 10 calls, which is also in ANZ, there's laws surrounding how much outreach there can be. And so you're trying to bury this line and go between this line of coming across as a valued consultant who can help, but also not coming across as just another person who wants to sell you something for their own benefit. Unfortunately, the mentality has changed. And I can tell you, like, I do a bit of hybrid BDR at the moment with that partnerships piece. It is hard work. It is very hard work to put yourself in a position where you're not coming across as a salesperson. And that's the last thing you ever want as well. So yeah, it was definitely why I was really keen to speak with you. Obviously, you're a man who has got quite a big online presence, and I'd love to get a bit more of your overview of not only the NZ market, but more of a kind of holistic perspective of the way things going. And also, yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that partnerships piece. For me, it is all about, I am new to the industry. I am trying to meet as many people as I can. And it's great to be able to meet you, Jason. So I really appreciate this.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. Look, I'm very fortunate. This industry has looked after me very well. It's created a great lifestyle for me. It's paid my bills for many years. It's allowed me to become a digital nomad and be able to consult from anywhere in the world, and working from home certainly helped that as well. You know, I have a lot of gratitude in my soul for this industry, and I wouldn't be where I am without it. And so this is why I try in every way that I can to give back to the industry with podcasting and with mentoring and all those other things. I really am genuinely trying to give back to an industry that has given me pretty much everything career-wise that has been really good to me has been because of this industry. And so I'm super grateful for that. And I'm always happy to send the ladder back down, because I had so many people in the beginning of my career that I wouldn't have got where I got to without them, and without them sharing their knowledge and their experience. And yeah, I guess it's just hopefully a positive circular thing. But I think that what has happened, particularly over the last 6 to 12 months, is that particularly if they're brand new to the industry like you, and they don't already have relationships and they haven't been building an audience over a sustained period of time, because I've been putting out content now pretty routinely for about 6-7 years now, and obviously worked in the industry long before that, which gave me the foundation of knowing what to even talk about that was interesting to me. And when I first started out putting out content routinely, I didn't even have a business yet. I was working merchant side, and it wasn't like I was thinking, oh, I better build an audience because in 5 years' time, I'll be starting up my own thing. And so therefore, I better have an audience that I can monetize. That wasn't my thinking. It was more, and I've said this on other podcasts where I've been a guest and on my own, where I've said really what pushed me over the edge to actually start making content was Gary Vee. And I know he's very polarizing, and look, love him or hate him, the reality is the guy walks his talk. And the reality is he's been putting out content since forever. And he just kept smashing me in his content. He was like, if you think you're a thought leader and you think you've got something good to say, freaking put it out there, open yourself up for critique and feedback. And then you'll know whether you actually are a thought leader or not. If you never put your thoughts out there, how do you know whether you're a thought leader? How do you know whether you're doing and saying anything original? How do you know unless you put it out there? And so he just kept smashing that. And I finally was like, okay, I give up, Gary. I'm going to start putting out content, whether or not it's good. Whether or not it gets seen or heard doesn't matter. I'm just going to start putting it out and trust the process. And I'm so thankful that I did. And I'm so thankful that I did it over a sustained period of time, because otherwise it would have been so much harder for me to go out and say, start my own consultancy, because I would have been starting from scratch, and I would have had to do that hardcore outbound thing where I was smashing people with cold emails and cold calls and cold DMs. And I just could never see myself being that kind of guy, because I'm consultative in kind of everything that I do. It's the way I'm hardwired. Some may perceive that as being a little bit salesy, but that's not my background. My background is solution architecture. And so because of that, I almost come at everything through a solution architecture mindset. And whether that's data, whether that's organizational design, process design, doesn't really matter what it is. I come at that through that lens of solution architecture. And because of that, I'd like to think that my content comes off as less salesy, because I'm always thinking about solutions more than I've always just worked out in my own life that if I worry about doing a really good job at whatever it is that I'm doing, the money will take care of itself. And it always has. And I've been very lucky. Now, that doesn't always work for everybody, but for me, I found that to be the case. And if I'd have tried to monetize, quote unquote, my audience from day one, I would have just come off as I would have just seemed like a massive fraud. That's how I would have felt myself anyway.
Well, there's plenty who've fallen that hurdle already, who've started it in the last year or two to try and really push themselves as these leaders in the market. And suddenly when you've got no trust in someone, and they're suddenly saying, pay only this and you'll receive this, it is way too transactional. And you're right, it's you're providing an upfront contract of, this is who I am, this is what I do. If you're interested, then come along. Join me. So it's worked well, particularly with that mentor. The way you put across these kind of sessions, I thought was really, if you did want feedback, I'm sure it's worked well enough for you. It's come across as very organic as well. There's no pressure to it. It's, look, let's start off, let's build a relationship and we can see where it goes thing. And I like that upfront contract of being like, you don't know a lot of people, you don't know what you're signing up for. I feel with you can actually provide a personality through the posts and articles and podcasts that you've done to just build up that level of trust where something like this is a natural progression. And it's brilliant.
Thank you. Look, I think if it sounds, based on what you've just said, that you're well on the right track. You understand that this is, you've got to make the revenue in the short term to keep your job and make sure that it is. I'm not trying to say that this is easy by any stretch of the imagination. I know there's this massive tug of war in most businesses, particularly tech-enabled businesses right now, that they're not able to get VC funding. And so therefore, they've really got to grow organically as fast as they can to keep the wheels on the vehicle going down the motorway at 100 miles an hour. And so I get the tension between the need to have an outbound motion and the need to have organic inbound leads that come primarily from content and showing expertise and showing empathy to the industry and participating as an active participant in the industry. And I sense that tension, and I know that tension myself, because I'm working now with a SaaS platform, Mikata, and I'm helping them with GTM. And look, it's tough. If we had gone to market for VC funding in mid or even late 2021, we probably wouldn't need to do hardly any content work at all, because we could pour so much money into an outbound motion and people would have been so receptive to it at that time that we wouldn't necessarily have had a strong content play. We wouldn't have had to have influencers involved. The motion would have been so much simpler, really, is what I'm saying. But I think now, as the market continues to contract, I'm even seeing it in my own business. The number of leads, say, over the last 6 months that are coming in, inquiries through LinkedIn DMs and everything else, the inbound has slowed down considerably. It hasn't stopped. And I'm so thankful, because I refuse to do outbound. I'm just not wired that way. I'm not going to slide into someone's DMs and say, hey, do you need some help with your B2B commerce strategy? That's just not the way I'm wired. So what I've tried to say many times before is I'm trying to build my brand, for lack of a better term, as a magnet instead of a lasso. I never want to be a lasso. I never want to be roping people in and dragging them towards me, kicking and screaming. I want to be a magnet that hopefully pulls in selectively the people that would be a good fit for working with me, and vice versa. But I get, now that I'm also working on a SaaS technology as well, now the conversation becomes really hard, because you need to do two things at once. You have to have some kind of an outbound motion. You have to have a demand capture motion, usually through the likes of Google and Facebook and LinkedIn, mostly ads, paid ads, performance ads. But again, you don't want those to come across as salesy. You want those to come across as educational. You want those to come across as entertaining. It's achieving that balance between inbound and outbound, particularly in a SaaS or a technology-oriented business in our industry. It is a hard balance to strike without hurting your brand in the process. It's fucking hard.
Completely. Like, it is such a fine line between value add and value return, and trying to find that, like, perfect prize of being able to provide someone with exactly what they want without there being any break in trust of you asking too much or pushing the boundaries. And you're 100% right, particularly with the content piece. We were very fortunate. We signed our Series B in March last year. So in terms of a cash runway, we'd like to say that there's a level of skill set to that decision as well. It is also just against the black swan events, or whatever you might want to call it, of last year. We got lucky as well. And it meant that the redundancies that were taken were more strategic than they were emergent. But it just meant that, considering the next year, we have one primary goal, and that is to keep that revenue sustainable. We've been backed by JP Morgan. We're in a really good position right now. But from an individual perspective versus the company perspective, I love the idea of that partnerships piece, because it's what I'm passionate about. I'm much less tailored than others as well to particularly hard outbounding. Obviously, you'll do it when there's a paycheck behind it and you can do it well from a commissions basis. But the long-term goal for me is much more that partnerships piece. So it's why I'm interested in not only this session and hopefully a few others to pick your brain about how you built that network. And obviously there's the personal brand involved there. And I feel like I can learn a lot from you about that, because that is not my forte.
Yeah.
But really understanding like getting the progress and the process in order for that much more longer term benefit to both the organization you work for, but also creating that personal aspect too of seeing the return and progression that could be available to you as well. Obviously, it's 2 years for me so far, and I've loved every day. No matter how many cold calls I've been asked to make, it's still pretty fun getting to speak to people in the industry, because at the foundation, they are some of the most interesting people you'll speak to. Mums who start stores during COVID and suddenly are doing 100K a month and have no idea which way to turn because they're making too much money. But how much do I take out? How much do I put back in? It's really interesting.
And they're so terrified to make any changes to their business because they don't want to break the spell. And they're like, man, I don't want to change a thing, but they know they have to change things over time. They have to evolve to stay relevant. But they're going, man, I feel like I've stumbled onto this really good thing that's allowed me to improve my life dramatically. And I don't necessarily know exactly what the secret sauce was to get me here. And I'm afraid to change the recipe for fear of breaking something, right? That's
treading on eggshells, completely treading on eggshells. The eggshells of success. And where do I go from this? And who do I speak to? Because anyone who I've been used to outside the e-com industry normally has a big value return that they're expecting as well. And actually, it is much more of a holistic, wholesome community of people just actually wanting to chat and hear about the stories as well, because it's motivation for themselves, but it's also so interesting. Whatever product or industry it might be, I definitely have found. And I'm sure you've spoken to hundreds of people who you've gone, how the hell have you come up with that idea? But it's also amazing to see how well it's done for you as well.
Completely. And I think one of the things that especially tech-enabled platforms, whether that be fintech, whether that be direct tech, whatever it might be, I think one of the things that gets lost in the conversation quite often about partnerships, particularly with agencies, their partnerships with agencies, I should say, is that they will even try to, because when I was working agency side, when I was running agencies, I was getting 10 to 20 calls a week from technology platform providers that said, hey, we should catch up. Let me buy you a coffee. Let me take you out to lunch. Let me take you to virtual coffee. I need to tell you about this amazing technology that we've got. And there's no way that you can take all those calls and do your job. It's impossible. But you also don't want to overlook maybe a game-changing piece of technology for your clients because you just didn't have time to take that call. So there is such a fine balance there. And so I would try to formulate 2 or 3 or 4 very quick questions that I could ask a vendor, potential partner, just to get to the heart of what they did. And there was 2 things that would oftentimes get through to me in a way that would cause me to want to take that phone call and to want to have that follow-up call and to actually make time in my day for it. There was 2 things. One is if they said to me, look, we're building pipeline of our own independent of you, and we're going to be trying to position you with our potential clients so that we can make recommendations where it makes sense for you to talk to our clients, right? Because 9 times out of 10, the reason why a tech partner is contacting you is because they want you to provide them with pipeline. So if you can flip that script on its head and you can say, look, we're trying really hard to create a significant and sustained inbound pipeline of our own. And oftentimes these merchants will not necessarily have a partner at all, or they're on Shopify and they've gotten a $200 theme and they've found some success, but they really are now at a point where they need a proper partner to take them to the next level, to do code control and to do deployment management and to do custom dev, et cetera, et cetera. And we want to be able to position the right people with the right deals with our inbound deal flow. That will always prick up my ears a little bit, because then it's, instead of just asking me for, hey, let's partner so you can send me leads, it's, hey, how can we partner so that we can position each other appropriately with the right joint clients? That's the first thing. Second thing that would always stand out to me is, if they were, a lot of times, technology partners, they don't understand their technology that well, particularly the salespeople of that technology. They would rather, in 99% of the time, I'd rather talk to a CTO rather than a CMO or a CSO as a partner, as a tech. Let's say I'm an agency partner. I would 9 times out of 10, I would rather take a call from a CTO than a CSO. And 9 times out of 10, it's the head of marketing, or it's the head of sales, or it's a BDM, or whatever that's calling me. And they don't know, like, I start asking them 3 or 4 technical questions about their platform and the way that it works. And they go, oh, I can get you on a demo. I can get you on a demo with one of our technical sales engineers. It's, no, you should fucking know this. This is your business. You're out here trying to sell something that you can't even answer 3 or 4 fundamental questions about your technology and how it works. That you should be embarrassed about that. And you should know what type of questions technical people are going to ask before you ever get on the phone with them. Because obviously there's the partnership enablement, which usually involves an element of commercials, but then there is the technical enablement, right? There's the piece where the partner is going to have to invest some time and energy into becoming upskilled and build almost like a mini practice around your technology in order to be able to deliver it and position it well with the merchant. And so I think those kind of conversations are the 2 kinds of conversations I enjoy having. And those are the types of conversations that usually will get cut through. Because, man, agency principals, they are bloody busy, man. They're busy servicing clients, and they're going to take maximum, they're going to take 1, maybe 2 partnership calls a week, maybe. And most agency principals I know will take as few as possible. And then when they have an opportunity come up where they're out there searching for a technology for their client, they will reach out to the partner. They want to have an active deal that is relevant to that technology before they open a dialogue around partnership. Because there's no point in putting a partnership in place until there's a live deal for you to be discussing. And the tack I started taking latterly was, when people would ring me and try to tell me about their new thing and, hey, do you want to become a partner? It was like, hey, send me all the information through about what you do, how you do it, what makes you guys different, what value do you add to my customers, not to me, to my customers. Then when an opportunity that fits this profile comes in, then we'll start talking partnership, because there's actually no point for us to sign an NDA, for us to start talking about all this stuff, for us to sign a partnership agreement, and then we don't have a deal to talk about for 2 years. There's no point. And so that's the tack that I took latterly, particularly in agency land, was, look, once I know basically what you do and how you do it, if there's an opportunity that comes across my desk that feels like a good fit, then we'll talk partnership. And then we'll talk enablement. And that's how I got around that flood of phone calls that was coming in every single week.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's super useful. Definitely my positioning has been not only speaking with a number of tech partners in space as well, but the agency space. Obviously, people have changed their mindset a little bit. They are a little bit more open to those conversations, but you still need to cut through the bull. Yeah. That's what you need to do. And we've had a couple of agencies who are just desperate for new leads, or they are desperate for customers who actually have the available cash flow for them to be able to work correctly. And it's not just another conversation of, look, we like you as an agency, but we slightly need to minimize how much we're paying you here. It is different from that, in terms of we can actually bring genuinely valuable customers who are growing and have growth plans in place, rather than just shoring up everything, that they can really get to go with each other. And I'm definitely positioning myself as, I've got 2 conversations today actually with prospective partners of where I'm positioning Wayfly. So this is really interesting we're talking about it now, because it is, with my understanding of it is, yes, obviously I don't come from the technical background, but you mentioning that, my director mentioning that, being like, you need to be able to answer their questions. This isn't going to be a server plugin. It's not going to be any different from a landing page, but it is going to be important for them to really understand how we work, because you're not the one who can do the selling. If they do find someone that's correct for the job, they've already signed the partnerships agreement, but how are their reps, how are their managers going to be able to explain Wayfly to any prospective customers if you don't put it across in a way that's going to be beneficial to them, for one, but also in a way that actually sounds strategic and is going to impact them on a personal and business level as well. So yeah, it's so important, and the positioning on that is hard. It's not easy to do, and definitely it's interesting to get, when you're being called and asked about would you be interested in a partnership, what your reaction was in terms of if someone's just going, oh, we got decent leads, we're keen to work with you. If you haven't got anything more precise and to the point, you're just going to tell them to piss off, because you were getting enough at that stage as well that it's just not a significant impact. And you need to have something that's going to be more like, all right, this is great in terms of the customers, this is what's going to happen. And particularly at the moment, there's a fairly simplistic argument that you can have, being like, we can take care of working capital, allowing them to have cash flow to spend on growth projects that you can provide for them.
Correct.
So from this perspective, does it not make sense for us to have a conversation? Mostly the answer is yes. So that's the simple sell at the moment. I definitely might have to get a bit more precise when it comes to whatever the market may do in the next 6 months. But at least at the moment, it's making sure that the quality of what I'm being able to explain really benefits the reps on an individual basis. I think I'm chatting to about 8 of them, which is my first time doing it as well, about 8 of them at 2 p.m. today. So we'll see how it goes.
Nice. Look, also don't shy away from using comparisons to Shopify Capital, for example, just because they're a quote unquote competitor. Don't shy away from using comparisons that will allow them to connect dots super quick. Like basically say, if I was in your shoes and I was talking to an agency, I'd say, just think of us as the Shopify Capital for everyone. That's sure, you do a few other things and you do some offline stuff, but in language that they will understand instantly. If you just say, we're the Shopify Capital for everyone, that's basically who we are in a nutshell. Now, obviously, I'm going to tell you these 5 other things that are amazing, but in a nutshell, that's what we are. That's what we do. And because almost everybody who's anybody in the industry will understand what that means and what that is, then that means that the rest of the dialogue is pre-greased, because already in their mind, they're going, oh, I get this. I get the model. I understand the model. And sure, like I said, I know that Shopify Capital is technically a competitor of yours, and so you may not want to put their name up in lights, but leveraging that kind of term recognition or category recognition, I think there's nothing wrong with that. We, in some respects, with some of the platforms and technologies I've worked with, we will use a comparison with a key competitor in the market because man, category creation is just so hard. It is really hard, because if you're trying to create demand for the category and for you, that is just so difficult to do. Whereas kind of Shopify Capital has helped to create demand for that category of working.
We found the same thing with Clearco. Obviously, they made a huge noise coming into the ANZ market, and they did brilliantly in helping so many businesses with that initial piece. And a lot of our more senior AEs do make the joke of, we provide what Clearco does, we just try and do it with a little bit more finesse. And it can be as simple as that, but Shopify Capital is brilliant. And actually, it's interesting you mentioned that competitor piece. A lot of people do like to talk back at their competitors. I have no issue with Shopify Capital. They are brilliant in terms of the simplicity and understanding. That tech side has enabled merchants to literally click a button and receive funding to help with their working capital. That is so impressive. That is so impressive. And there may be negatives to it, such as higher default rates, but Shopify is in a position that they can experiment and get it wrong in order to be able to get it right. And it's so interesting. Yeah, to be perfectly honest, a couple of us have been approached by Shopify Capital to see whether we do want to be people on the ground by the team. And that's been, it would be the ultimate villain move, but it just shows that there's a level of respect. And definitely for us, spot on, Jason. It's never talking down your competitors, it's talking them up, because what you're doing is building a positive image of what you're providing from a product and business perspective.
And hey, look, if someone else is going to pay to effectively do marketing on your behalf for the category, then hey, why wouldn't you take that? Why wouldn't you take that? And it's just a gift, right? It's a total gift. And so I just think your mindset is in the right place about this. And it sounds like you didn't necessarily need any new ideas from me, but more importantly, I think it sounds like you appreciate the validation that, hey, we're heading in the right direction. We're thinking in the right ways. We're having the right conversations with the right people. And if we stay the course, we're going to stack the deck in our favor for this to turn out pretty good for us. And hopefully I've been able to provide a bit of validation for the directions you're going.
It's lovely to make the introductory piece as well. And don't worry, I definitely have a few more questions for you as we go along. I more just wanted to, pick your brains this one. But in terms of the central subjects that you speak about on these mentorship sessions, I know a lot of it's brand owners as well. And it is understanding how to implement a successful business, but also the way to approach things and your reaction to it. And what are the main topic areas that you go through with them? Because obviously from just a general learning perspective, if you're happy to have me join these mentorship sessions, I'd love to just learn more about from more brand and merchant side than necessarily from a cash flow side, because there's a million different plates that you're spinning. And if anything, and in the long run, I would love to create something that's my own as well. Just being able to, get a general understanding of what you do speak about and whether this is something that we can continue chatting about.
Yeah, look, I'm open to almost any topic. Occasionally, I'll have a guest mentor that will come on and they'll speak to a specific topic. Like I had Jonathan Day on and he was talking about headless. And so I'll have specific mentors, guest mentors come on and talk very topical, very specific, very deep dive. Other than that, I would say that anywhere from 75 to 85% of the people that join my group mentorship calls now, they come from a tech background. That's what they're doing. They're working for tech companies. They're working for omni-channel technology providers. They're working for an AI company that's integrating AI into live chat or into customer service technology, or one of my mentees he's got an omni-channel technology that really starts at its core at the POS, at point of sale. And look, I speak to lots of different people about lots of different things. One of my one-to-one mentees, she originally was working for a brand as the digital marketing manager. And so we were talking about growth and we're talking about different things there. And then now she's out on her own creating designing and manufacturing her own product and market. And she wants to initially have it be D2C. And then she's looking at whether to do B2B as well. And so we're having all kinds of conversations around channel mix. We're having lots of similar sounding conversations, but the nuances are what makes the difference, right? So it would be easy for me to give a platitude of, okay, if you're in tech and you're working anywhere remotely in eComm and omni-channel, go out and put a whole bunch of content out. That's a very trite thing to say, right? And I think everybody should be doing that. But I think it's about having some element of strategy as opposed to a scattergun approach or throwing everything against the wall and just seeing what sticks. I think there has to be intentional, right? Has to be intentional. And I think for me, that's what I'm trying to help these vendors and partners and people in the industry. I'm trying to hold them to a higher standard than maybe sometimes they hold themselves to. And I'm also trying to help them understand that if you purely do cold outbound and you do not do that with an incredible amount of respect and finesse, you will destroy your brand. You may not see it today and you may not see it tomorrow, but you will become known in the industry as the technology vendor that does cold calling and does it really badly. And trust me, the industry talks, and people will go, oh God, I can't stand that guy. He's just constantly cold calling everybody in the industry, trying to milk them for anything they're worth. And that word gets out and you will destroy a brand really quickly. People oftentimes, they say to me, what's the matter with an outbound motion? What's the matter with that? The matter is you can very easily destroy your brand. If you connect with someone on LinkedIn and you immediately smash them with a pitch, my process for that on LinkedIn is they immediately get blocked. It's a fixed response. I have about 350 people on my block list on LinkedIn, and I'd say 95% of them are people that connected and then immediately pitched me in the first contact. There's no exceptions. They immediately get blocked. So they will never, ever have a chance. So let's say they come to their senses after 6 months of doing cold outbound, and it's not really working for them, and they change tack and they start putting out really engaging, really funny, really entertaining, really educational content. I will fucking never see that content again because they're blocked. So I'm giving that as a tangible example of how you can seriously fuck up your brand in a very short period of time by doing disrespectful outbound. Because I will block them on email, I will block them on LinkedIn, I will block them on my cell phone, I will block them on WhatsApp, I will block them everywhere because I do not want to be chased around by people. And so that's what I'm just simply trying to be as respectful of my industry as possible, because what I would hate is an amazing piece of tech or someone who's got some super cool information to share that's going to help me, for example, and it's going to educate me. And now I don't get a chance to see that because they were a dick with their outbound motion. That would be like the worst outcome ever.
No, and it's honestly so refreshing to hear you say that, because obviously from a leadership perspective, some of these larger organizations, and it's been a case at ours as well, it's just about leads worked when it comes to how many times you're hitting a lead, all of this. And Fortunately, Australia, we do have our own little set rules of engagement because we've had to fight nail and tooth to do that, because we understand after the last 2 years, if you're going and hitting someone 7 to 8 times through various calls, LinkedIn, emails, they're going to tell you to fuck off.
Yes.
And it's unbelievably frustrating when, you have leadership potentially saying, oh, you didn't hit that lead enough. It's, look, the guy told me, let's chat in 4 months. I've built a relationship there. I want to chat to him in 4 months. There's no point trying to push it down his throat now. Let's get on a meeting, let's chat. Because he understands we built up a decent enough relationship between what we do. So why don't we approach it when it's going to be something that's tangible for him, rather than something which is just purely for a number for them to put in front of a larger scale business case. And it is, you can probably see the smile on my face, because it is, we got our director here who's fighting for us to make sure that we can actually do holistic sales and in a beneficial manner and not just burn leads. Because also, if you're speaking about it purely from numbers anyway, Australia is a much smaller and brilliant market. If you want to go do it in the US, unfortunately, there are so many people doing that, and that's just the case over there. But over here, you burn leads, you're going to run out significantly faster of really good companies that you can work with than the hundreds of thousands that are available abroad. And that has been why I've been fighting nail and tooth for a partnerships position here, because there is so much more to explore and so much more to get from warm introductions, from actually building long-term partnerships with people, gaining an understanding of some of the problems from a market perspective. And at the moment, so little budget has been placed towards that, which means there's not even currently a full-time position. There's not enough money to be able to. Last year, we had our own place at Retail Fest as well, and that was a huge success. This year, nothing has been placed towards it. And this is exactly when it should be being positioned as the most important thing going on. Obviously, cold outbounding is going to work, but it has to be done with such a level of finesse that's not sustainable long term.
It isn't.
And it's actually so nice to chat about it, because obviously it is what's going wrong with, and why I feel so bad for so many e-com brand owners at the moment, is they are getting peppered from all sides with these tech companies who have these inflated targets, who have these specific things that they need in order to be able to survive until they can raise more VC funding, whatever it might be. Like, from a business perspective, they are just getting angry. I hate calling someone who genuinely sounds so deflated to hear, hey, this is Hugh from Wayflyer. I've been doing it for 2 years, but I like making a cold call, especially when it goes well. There's nothing better. But when they're just like, man, I'm not interested. Okay, fair enough. I'm really sorry for even taking up your time. If it's not going to be something that's relevant. So it's super interesting. And I could honestly chat about it for hours on end, because it's a huge change, and it's one that not enough people are keeping up with. They really aren't. And Clavio, and I know James Guerin from there as well, he, like, again, similarly beneficial conversation, just being like, man, we need to do something here, because there is a reason why there's sustainability within a few businesses here, and there's a reason why a lot of them are going to be going down the drain.
Yep. And I tell you, the ones that go down the drain, they, in most cases, will have earned it well and truly. They will deserve it. And that's capitalism. And what's going to happen is the ones that are doing a really good job and are being very respectful and are able to ride out the storm on the backside of this, when the economy starts to open back up again, when interest rates come down and all those things, and we've got the fuel back on the fire again, those brands that were able to fight through this period, this time, will come out the other side with such a strong position, because so many of their competitors they'll have gone tits up. And it's just the nature of the beast. In contraction times, people that engage in bad behavior out of desperation, they end up shooting themselves in the foot, and that has long-term consequences. And that's all I'm trying to share with the industry is be thoughtful, be respectful, be empathetic. Just don't be a dick. Basically, that's in a nutshell. Don't be a dick. Understand that everybody is struggling right now. Times are tight. They're probably going to get tighter. Interest rates are probably going to continue to rise for the next 3 to 6 months, the next 1 to 3 quarters, to try to get a handle on inflation. Things are going to get tough. They're going to get really tough. But the tough times never last forever. What's that saying? But tough people do. So the reality is, and you guys are in the luxurious position of having the runway to not have to be dicks, to not have to resort to desperate measures. You can be measured and respectful and have a decent cadence and have a decent share of outbound versus inbound, and try to be realistic about your expectations of what the market can provide right now. And so I think you sound like you got a really good head on your shoulders. You sound you're well on your way to doing things properly and making a really solid quality name for yourself in the industry without burning bridges. So look, I would say, based on what I've heard, keep doing what you're doing, because it sounds like you're on the right track, man.
I really appreciate that, Jason. Yeah, it's nice to just have a general conversation. Obviously, things can be so tailored towards targets and various needs for the business. And actually, it's an industry that I have suddenly found myself within a very short period of time loving and being very passionate about. And I've taken a few brand owners for coffees and stuff, not to chat Wayflyer, which I thought they thought it would be about, but actually just to find out about their stories, because it is interesting, it is engaging. And yeah, if you can create that holistic relationship with someone, it's just going to pay off in the long run, because it won't necessarily be for a particular business need. It may just be like, all right, now's the right time. Let's at least have this conversation. I trust you, you trust me. I know you're not going to try and dog me down the line. Yeah. And yeah, that's significantly better, and what I enjoyed doing in commercial real estate as well. So if I can take anything from that, it would be, obviously the suits fit comfortably, but the hoodies and the t-shirts are a little bit better to be going for coffees and having a few beers.
And I think also, you never know, you probably won't be at Wayflyer forever. You'll work in other companies, you'll work for other companies. You may have you may start your own gig, you may start a podcast, who knows? I just know that by trying to be, and I'm not perfect either, I make my own mistakes, but I've always tried to be respectful of people's time in our industry and their knowledge and their expertise. But because I have a track record of trying to be respectful at the very least, when I message people, when I email people, for example, to be on the podcast, I very rarely get a flat out, no, I refuse to be on your podcast because you're a dick, Jason. That just doesn't happen. They might be too busy, and they might say, hey, hit me up in 2 months, hit me up in 4 months, because I'm really busy right now. I'd love to be on the pod, but I can't do it right now. Or, hey, very rarely, 1 or 2 times somebody said, hey, I see you as a competitor in the market, so I'm not really keen to kind of come and contribute to content for you. But other than that, I'd say 98, 99% of the time, people are like, hey, Jace, I love your content, love what you're doing in the industry, would love to be on the podcast. Here, let me book in for this date. And I think that you just never know where you're going to end up. And so I think that it's really easy to burn bridges in any industry, but particularly our industry, because it's so small and it's so tight knit, word gets around really fast. And I try to encourage people to say, look, you just never know. In 5 years, you don't know where you're going to be. In 10 years, you don't know where you're going to be. And so if you lay the groundwork now for a really strong relational ecosystem that's based on mutual trust, respect, and empathy, that will pay dividends in ways you can't even imagine today. And so that's all I'm trying to do. I'm trying to just lead by example is what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, keep doing it, because it's honestly lovely to chat. And yeah, definitely these mentorship sessions are awesome. Even if it's just shooting the breeze, having a chat about wherever the direction goes, it's incredibly beneficial. So thank you.
If you'd like to get mentored by Jason for free, head over to greenwoodconsulting.net, scroll to the bottom of the page, and click Get Mentored by Jason.